You asked me last time, is there something you say in Persian
Ah,
for the new year? And I was like, I was completely befuddled and I didn't remember. But of course there is. And it's Eid Shema Mubarak, which means Happy New Year. Like enjoy the spring festival is basically what it means. And it's funny, I think we had our first conversation on the first day of the New Year Spring Festival. And today is the last day of the New Year Spring Festival. So that's
oh,
like
I love that.
wild.
Oh,
Anyway, Eid Shema Mubarak and Happy New Year and all the best for beautiful spring.
I'm Liz Sabachik, and this is Humans of Tango, where we explore what tango has to teach through the experiences of those who dance it. That was Mitra Martin, co-creator of Oxygen Tango School and Awaken Tango. And yes, Mitra and I nerded out so hard the first time we talked that we decided to talk twice.
When I was a kid, I lived in one, two, three, four, five different places. I went to high school in the Netherlands, and my mom is from Iran, and my dad is American. And so I kind of grew up in this bicultural context, but then also like living in different cultures as my family and I moved. So we had a very sort of strong family culture. It's a model that I draw on now, that commitment to coming together at the end of every day and lighting a candle and having dinner together and paying attention to each other. And I think there's actually a lot of similarity between some of the textures of Middle Eastern culture and Persian culture and the world of tango. So that when I found tango, it felt a little bit more like this, recognition of the festivity, the ritual, the sort of sensuality. I had moved to New York after college and I was working in this consulting company. And by some random fluke, I ended up being assigned to this business trip that took me to several different cities around the world. And I remember the night before I left, my boss, the CEO of this company, he said, Mitra, when you're in Buenos Aires, I want you to dance a tango. It's just so random, It's like he
And
picked
you're like,
that
all right, boss.
out of the air, he's my boss.
Oh
It's
my
like,
God.
okay, I'd never thought of tango. I didn't know what it takes to dance. I don't know. It was a bit of a blessing in a way. It was a blessing. And you know how they say, like, the tango awaits you?
El tango te espera.
I remember arriving in Buenos Aires and it was springtime. It was like September, October, I think. It was beautiful. Everywhere around me was tango. There were people dancing tango in the hotel lobby. There were people dancing tango on the streets. There was the music of tango in the taxi cabs. And, I asked everybody, like, okay, where do I get to dance a tango? Like, where should I go? Somebody that I had been working with, he was like, oh, I can figure that out for you. And he gave me a slip of paper that said the address for La Viruta.
An iconic tango club that celebrated its 30th anniversary in
And he
2024.
was like, this is where you should go. This is a real tango place, but don't go before midnight. So I was like, okay, I'll go. And I showed up and I was like enchanted. It was so beautiful, like the fairy lights, the sense of energy and focus and festivity. And there were people of all ages. There were teenagers, there were older people. And I think there was a connection between that and like the the festivity and bright energy of some of the Persian gatherings that I remember with my extended family, this sense of like all sharing across generations, eating, sitting together, playing together. Because there was anti-Iranian sentiment when I was a child, my mother and our family kind of distanced themselves from Iran and the Persian language and Persian culture. There was a bit of racism, and there was I think there's just a lot of disappointment about sort of what happened in that country and with the government.
Check the show notes for background on the recent history and government of
And
Iran.
so that kind of put me in the space of like wanting to find this part of myself that was not so accessible to me. And I think that sort of quest and kind of like sense of yearning has served me well in trying to understand tango, which is another culture that's not one that I was born into, but one that's like hugely important to me, and sort of this sense of being fueled to kind of penetrate something that feels like it's my birthright in a way. And yet I didn't come into the world with the chance to like embody it with ease. It takes some cultivation and some training and some determination. I've struggled with the idea of like, I want to fully inhabit my Persianness in a similar way. Like, I want to fully inhabit my identity as an Argentine tango practitioner.
Hmm.
And both of those things are a little bit, someone will say, well, you'll never really embody tango because you're not Argentinian. I mean, there's that kind of voice in the head, you'll never really be Persian because you weren't born in Iran or you're not fluent and native in the language, but I don't know if those voices really matter, because I think through just love and committing to your own journey within a culture and within a craft and within a practice, you can embody whatever you want to. And there's nobody to tell you that it's not authentic or real or enough. I did my undergraduate in comparative literature. I studied gardens in medieval French and Persian poetry. That was like my thesis. I worked on it for almost 2 years. It was so interesting how the poets of French, medieval times, like the Romance of the Rose, for instance, like they presented gardens as this really dangerous place where, like, if you go in, you are going to be seduced and you will, fall into sinfulness. And then in the Persian tradition, the gardens are these places that God created, full of sensual gifts that are of God, where you go there to immerse in like the gifts of the creator, essentially. And it's like such different relationships with the body, with sensuality, with nature, using the same metaphor, the same kind of symbol. And I think about that a lot. I think sometimes in tango, we're trying to create this like idyllic paradise place, this garden. And yet, if we come from like the Western European Anglo tradition, there's so much fear about really going there and like feeling our feelings and inhabiting our sensuality and all of that stuff. But, in the Persian tradition, and I think that there's a lot in common between Middle Eastern cultures and Latin cultures, as I mentioned before, there's this sense that like the sensuality and the sort of festivity is so natural, and it's a gift, and that's what we're here to inhabit and embody and share and use as a catalyst for growth. I danced, for 6 years in New York City, mostly at Triangulo, which was a really special place. I think so many of my core friendships and basic experiences happened through the Triangulo community.
More about Triangulo in the show notes.
It was really new and just really special to be able to like have friendships that also had this kind of movement, kinesthetic, physical component, and so much care. And, and I remember one time feeling like, oh, tango's too hard. It's not for me. I'm not good enough at this. I'm not moving fast enough. And, told everybody, oh, I'm quitting tango. And one of my friends was like, she was like, okay. And then like a month later, she was like, oh, it's your birthday. We're having a birthday party for you at Triangulo. So, please come. I was like, okay. And then I went back and, I feel like it's these friendships that
Aw.
kind of keep us connected to it, like people actually caring about you. I was dancing a lot and I was starting to travel more. And it seemed to me like the West Coast was like an exciting place to be for tango. So I wanted to go to the West Coast. One of my friends was moving to Los Angeles. I think my brother and sister were both going to Santa Barbara at the time. So I was like, oh, I'll go to Los Angeles. In New York, I'd also started to get exposed to contact improvisation. I found it really beautifully complementary to tango.
Hear more about tango and contact improv in Humans of Tango episode 16, featuring Aníbal Dominguez.
So I got to LA, I went to a contact improv jam, and I met Stefan, who's been my partner pretty much since then. And I was obsessed with tango, and he was curious about it and a little skeptical. I mean, he was a modern contemporary dancer, and he had all these like, I don't know, ideas about tango or
Mm. Like the
sense of,
stereotypes?
yeah,
Were
the
the stereotypes
stereotypes.
a
He was
turn
like,
off?
I don't know, I don't know about
Hmm.
this tango. But then, he came and he saw it, and he was really, really authentically drawn in. And so he started to explore tango, and I'd been on fire with tango for 6 years. So we started traveling together, and after a while, we wanted to create some of the tango culture that we enjoyed so much in the northern part of the West Coast in LA. There was a lot of tango already in LA, but there were elements of the music environment and just the culture and the creativity that we wanted to kind of bring in. And we just wanted to have more dancing on the West Side. So we started experimenting with building community, with teaching. We started a tiny, teeny, tiny practica. We found two people who were excited to learn tango, and we started this practica. I think it lasted for 2 years. And we
Just
tried
with
to
two
build it.
people?
It was just with two people. Like it started
Nice.
out as our
Nice.
house.
That makes
We
me feel
called it
so
like,
good about my
you
classes
gotta,
that sometimes have two people. It's like,
it's like, that's sometimes where you start, and we call
yeah.
it we called it the nobody comes but us practica because like we wanted more people to come, but somehow it was like, yeah, that was the limit. And they became amazing dancers. Their names are Jennifer Bay and Dan Rosato. And I think we all were kind of aligned by this idea that tango could be like a force for good in the world. And
Mm.
we wanted to put on an event for the community that would symbolize that. And we called it the Oxygen Milonga because we decided that for everybody who came, we would take $1 to donate to plant a tree. So we started off the Oxygen Milonga in 2008. And a year later, after we had done a lot of experiments in teaching beginners and community building, we decided to start an actual school, and that was Oxygen Tango. The frame or the construct of saying it was a school got me really engaged with how people learn and how to teach. And I learned as much as I could from like teachers who were offering teacher trainings. I went to people's classes and transcribed their lessons and analyzed them. I think the conclusion that I came to was there's some kind of a fundamental mismatch between the delivery format that we conventionally use to teach tango, which is like the group class, and kind of the needs that people have.
Check the show notes for a link to Mitra's analysis of the problem with group classes.
And then the other thing was seeing that people, when they're learning, needed a sense of like a goal to work towards.
Which brings us back to Mitra's partner, Stefan Fabry.
Our first few collaborations were in dance theater, where we were bringing elements of tango into performance art. But then when we started the school, like the most productive aspect of our collaboration was in designing programs. And it really still is because Stefan brings kind of a structural perspective to program development that really allows me to kind of unleash my creativity. When we create like a program, he thinks of it from the perspective of establishing a worthy goal for the learner. And a lot of teachers don't think like that. The idea of like goals is kind of like strange in tango. It doesn't feel improvisational. It doesn't feel,
I'm glad it's not just me because I feel like
tango-y.
when you were like, you should have a
Yeah.
goal, I'm like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. But, it's not a given, is it?
It's not a given. And it's like, it doesn't have to be your goal forever, but it could be a goal for like 12 weeks. And our Tango Challenge recital was like a goal like that really riveted and galvanized beginners. It was a 12-week program. They had to pay in advance for the whole thing, had to sign an agreement. The requirements included coming to Tango 3 times a week.
Ooh, nice.
And there were also homeworks, like there was a journal about kind of like what they learned and what they were curious about. There was a workbook, there were projects, I think like 8 projects. Even something as simple like one of the first projects was like distinguishing between tango, milonga, and waltz.
The 3 rhythms of
I
tango,
think that project or the next one was also distinguishing between D'Arienzo and Di Sarli.
referring to 2 Golden Age orchestras with very different styles. Find examples in the show notes.
Those are challenging projects, in fact, for a total beginner, but they're concrete goals that they can accomplish. And then they can say, well, I did that thing, and I can prove that I can distinguish these things now. So that's kind of what I mean is like, if your goal is to be able to perform in an improvised group recital at the end of 12 weeks, what are the little micro goals that are going to get you there? And giving the beginners those micro goals along the way also was a way of retaining them. Like we have much better retention in that program than like a conventional like drop-in group class. I'm sure lots of people experience this, but I think you always want it to be easy and just amazing and blissful with your life partner and your love partner. You know, you want the tango to really, really work. And it was really difficult for us. It took us almost 10 years of practice and difficulty before we actually started enjoying dancing with each other.
Wow.
But we persisted and we kept trying. And it was like that idea of like love takes practice. All right, let's just keep trying. Let's see if we can find this. And also, you know, during that time, we really cheered each other on in our own tango adventures. And we still do. And we have the trust. So we're just excited for each other when the other person is like dancing their heart out, you know, no matter with who. So that's been a really nice foundation to be like growing our relationship on. And I think the other dimension of it is that we had to learn communication. And one of our students, Andre, really helped us with that. He was trained in nonviolent communication. And so just learning the skills and the rituals, how to kind of like approach it when we had friction with each other. It's just difficult to be like dance partners and business partners and love partners and life partners and all of that stuff. And, you know, friction is bound to arise. And so it's really helpful to have a toolkit. And it was helpful to also introduce that to the community. And some people really picked up on Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication work and were able to apply it in other aspects of their life and their business and stuff. So that was kind of helpful to see it take shape.
Mitra and Stefan co-directed Oxygen Tango from 2008 to 2017, when they decided to pass the torch to two dedicated members of their community, Dave Lampson and Megan Wiles. Mitra continued analyzing and experimenting with tango, eventually launching what she describes as an emerging innovation ecosystem called Awaken Tango, in collaboration with other inquisitive tango humans, including Corey Ireland, Meredith Klein, and Avik Basu, who, by the way, you can hear from in episode 20 of this podcast. In fact, Mitra and I first connected because of a survey she and Avik conducted through Awaken Tango.
I'm a researcher in terms of like the types of roles that I've done professionally. So I have seen firsthand the value of research in shaping experiences, shaping products, shaping organizations, you know, and what useful stuff comes out of it when you actually ask people questions and listen to their answers and try to create things based on what they say they want and need. You know, it's not perfect, but it's actually really quite useful. And I think in tango, you know, we're also passionate about this dance, and we have this aspiration that tango can grow and become a more meaningful part of our society. I think to achieve that potential, research is actually really helpful. I think tango is illegible outside of the community of tango dancers, and people don't really understand why it's special, why they might want to try it or learn about it or support it or create more tango in the world. I think we all also have strong ideas and opinions about how to teach, how to learn. I mean, I do, obviously, you've heard me share mine, you know, and I think there's a need for more innovation that could challenge what we have inherited as the conventions of tango. So I think that's what Awaken Tango was really about. Like, let's see what we can learn if we ask questions and try to really find high quality answers through applying the techniques of research. Avik actually brought forward this idea for this survey. It was something he was really curious about, this concept of like, what are people actually experiencing, thinking about? Like, what is the kind of inner world of tango dancers? I thought it was an interesting question, and that's really it. So the impulse for the survey was really Avik's, and I mean, we went on quite a journey to get the insights and then formulate it in a way that people could understand. And I think a few things really stand out from this. One is that the inner experience that people are having is pretty similar across the board. I mean, we're all attending to music, we're all attending to our partner, and there's a lot of positive affect that's pretty frequently a part of the tango experience, right? Helpfulness, noticing details of the present moment. And then it's just interesting to see how the data crystallized into these 13 different thought patterns, we call them, and which ones are like more closely correlated to each other and which ones are distant from each other. Music, expansion, intimacy, noticing details, helping my partner, self-acceptance. These are all aspects of the inner experience that are likely to happen with each other. In contrast, self-judgment, comparing, and external appearance are less likely to arise in combination with these other ones. One of the things that it brings up for me is there's maybe this assumption, maybe it's even a myth, that it's possible to have the most blissful, connected, profound, immersed, flowing encounter with your partner while also attending to the detail of how you appear from the outside. And that may be possible for some people, but I think what the data suggests is that mostly those thought patterns are anti-correlated to each other. I think it's healthy if teachers and influential tango people know that for many people, it's a bit overloading and maybe impossible to pay attention to the way you look while also fully inhabiting the moment with your partner. In a way, it's not surprising. It's totally intuitive, but it's nice to see the data showing it that, like, if you're focusing on the music, like, you're probably not focusing on how you look to others. Like, those things don't go together. If you're really focusing on like intimacy with your partner, probably you're not focusing on comparing yourself to other people. And if you're focusing on helping your partner, noticing details about what's going on in the present moment, probably you're not focusing on self-judgment. So there's these like different poles that are not commonly arising at the same time. There's like these different mindsets, one that's more judgmental and one that's more accepting, and some events sort of nudge us into judginess and some nudge us into acceptingness. There's a lot in our culture that brings us back to the visual. There's like the videos and there's the performing and there's the mirrors on the wall. And if we're aware of that, then we know, well, an event that has photographers, that has performances, that has mirrors all over the walls, that has expectations that people dress in an elegant way, let's say, like all of that's fine. People might love that. And like there'll certainly be like a following for that. And it might be that at those events, it is harder to step away from the judgmental tango mindset and the thought patterns that form that cluster. And that's kind of the thing that motivates me in the work with Awaken Tango and some of the other work I'm doing with community is like, how do we create those containers that bring out the bliss and the acceptingness? Because it seems like that's really where the richness of tango, the richness of the music, the richness of the present moment, the richness of the gift of your partner, that's where it really lies.
Morocho de ojazos negros y chambergo requintao, pañuelo florido al cuello y zapatos charolaos. Cantaba sentidos tangos con su voz sentimental y allá en su barriada humilde le llamaban el zorzal. 100 noches le cantó a su arrabal, 100 noches sollozó su corazón. Cariños tuvo 1000 y en su cantar iba sembrando sus amores el zorzal.
The concept of the acceptance mindset may have emerged from the Inner Experience survey, but Mitra herself has been working on acceptance in tango since her early days.
You go into tango space and there's lots of people, there's lots of energies, and it's a real practice to try to decipher what's honest. Like, what's true for you? Do you want to go to the left or do you want to go to the right? Do you want to walk towards this person or do you want to sit down? Do you want to dance this tanda or do you not want to dance this tanda? Are you going to wear your leading shoes or your following shoes? Like there's so many choices at every moment in the milonga, and you need to chart your path through the milonga. That's kind of the art of milonguear, right? And that takes years to really learn how to be yourself at a milonga, right? And being yourself means learning how to know and be honest about what you like, and to also decipher what are the mental goblins that hold you back from moving towards and cultivating what you like and what you're interested in. And there's something about tango itself that is self-correcting. So if, let's say, I am really interested in some things and I like some things, and I find that the people that I want to dance with don't want to dance with me, then I
Yeah.
get that feedback. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I really think there's room for like a million flowers to bloom in tango in all different ways, and that it's nice to create that sense of radical inclusivity and acceptance of the many ways that we in this complicated global culture with our different heritages and our different ancestries, our different histories, our different understandings, our different levels, to let each person kind of find their journey. I mean, my understanding of tango is that there's a lot of room for everybody in tango. You know what I mean? There's like room for creativity. There's a room for innovation. That's like very deeply embedded in the culture of tango. And you go to Buenos Aires, and I have been, and not that this is the only source of truth, but like there's so much creativity there. It's not like that there's one way. And yet I think at least as Americans, like we can enter tango with this sense of anxiety, wanting to be sure we're doing it right, like we're getting it right, and I think that anxiety and fear is at cross purposes with what tango really is about, what it offers. I just don't think tango is one thing. It's created by like who we each are and what we're each bringing to it. I think when Stefan and I started Oxygen, we were seeing the dance itself as like a way of training ourselves to actually love ourselves and other people. This idea of like love takes practice, right? And patience and the commitment to keep showing up. So tango kind of creates this practice ground for like dissolving this illusion of separation that is everywhere. That was actually our original mission statement with Oxygen Tango, to dissolve the illusion of separation, which is a bit like
Wow.
grandiose and
Wow. I love it.
wide. Yeah. And I think, looking back, I think it was kind of coming out of this experience of dancing Argentine tango, like just the practice of it as like a cauldron for personal growth. The dance ends up happening more beautifully as you learn to accept yourself and believe in yourself. And also as you learn to accept your partner and really notice them and be present with them and, as they really are, not as you want them to be. I think it's like the essence of tango that you kind of keep on looking to connect even when it's difficult. And that was one thing we used to say at Oxygen is like world peace, one embrace at a time. I don't think we can have world peace unless we're practicing becoming the more refined and more peaceful and joyful version of ourselves. It's been a journey to accept myself, just the way I am, to be honest. I think there was at one point when within the dance, I got really clear about accepting myself. When I dance with somebody, like, and I accept myself, I'm not trying to get approval from my partner. Like, I feel like that was a big kind of revelation, insight for me that like I'm enough and I don't need my partner's approval. Maybe we're creating something together, but that's different. And then it was another big insight for me to find that same vibe at the milonga, the art of milonguear, and coming into the milonga and knowing who I am and knowing that I'm a gift and knowing that like maybe it will work or maybe it won't, but like I don't need to be pleasing to other people. and try to get some particular response from them. And I think now I'm trying to discover that and embody that in the tango community, like writ large, and just be like, it's so easy to think like, well, your thing is only a thing if some particular person approves of it, or if it starts to kind of like catch fire or people are liking it. And innovation isn't really like that. Like if you're going to try to create something new that is a true gesture of your own voice, like you have to just stay with it as it matures, and it's not a question of trying to get somebody's approval. And I guess I would like for anybody who feels drawn to innovate and create new work and new structures and new culture and new elements of tango to find the right confidence and spaces where they can actually take risks and grow in the process. I'm kind of like ready for a new phase or era of contribution to tango. I don't think it's going to be on a local level, more about kind of creating collaborations across communities, hopefully, and helping center resources that could be a benefit to organizers who are trying to catalyze tango.
Which brings us back to Awaken Tango.
I think the thing I'm interested in now is what are the kinds of spaces and contexts and containers that really bring out the best in people, and bring out the potential that this form has to offer us. Encouraging the innovators, like encouraging people who have something they want to create that is difficult to create. And you had asked about altruism in tango. I mean, I kind of wanted to get back to it. I do think that for our experience of tango to get to another level, like it is important to invest in things that don't necessarily make financial sense right away. That's what Oxygen was. We invested a lot in experiments and pilot projects and curriculum development, things that don't really have like a direct way of becoming monetized. Many art forms, there's a tradition of like, maybe the word is patronage, donors, like people who actually support the development of new work and new thinking. And I think it would be really healthy if we normalize that in tango and kind of like really see, okay, there are some of these challenges, things we need to solve that need funding. Tango organizers can put in some of that energy. And if it can come from other places, that's really helpful and would lead to more of the solving of the root challenges that we experience in tango related to things like marketing, like beginner retention, like conflict resolution, like a lot of the different areas that have been longstanding problems because there's just no funding to really get to the bottom of the problem and start experimenting with like piloting solutions. It also is just about kind of creating this place where we're kind of encouraged to like pay really high quality attention to one another and really try to create that type of a field that is fertile, that things grow from, because things can't grow without that kind of nourishment of somebody's attention. I mean, I think that's what happens in a tanda, right? Like your partner comes alive in the sort of sunlight of your high quality attention to them, and you come alive in the context of somebody else paying attention to you. And those are the best dances, right? I think people's genius comes out when they're gifted with attention. And so the people who take you seriously, like before you're anything special, it's like that's such a gift, somebody who's willing to like actually lean in and engage and ask questions and help you develop your ideas. I'm thinking about people who like read rough drafts of stuff I wrote or like played early versions of games when I was still a mess and opinionated and incoherent and had just all these ideas, people who really listened and like took me seriously and tried to find the signal in the noise.
Check the show notes for a list of people Mitra named who provided this attention for her.
Not that they were uncritical. They were critical without being like judgy, while staying open and present and helping me evolve my ideas, and those are the people who we need if we're going to create new ways of teaching and learning and convening and dancing and presenting tango and performing it and engaging with each other through conflict. Like I'm just in awe grateful to those people, and I aspire to be that person for other people around me too. We talk about like a rising tide lifting all boats. I think that's how the tide gets created, is that kind of generosity.
Here's to accepting and maybe even loving ourselves and each other, and to the ways we grow in the process. Thank you, Mitra, and thanks to La Orquesta Típica Misteriosa Buenos Aires for their interpretation and recording of Zorzal, with music and lyrics by Dorita Zarate.
Cerró sus ojos pa' siempre y tras ellos fue el zorzal. 100 noches le cantó a su arrabal, 100 noches sollozó su corazón. Cariños tuvo mil y en su cantar iba sembrando sus amores el zorzal.